Okay. This is Hal Mendelson, retired librarian from the University of Central Florida, Orlando, Florida. I'm here to interview SELA past president Barry Baker, who served in office from 2000 to 2004. Welcome, Barry, and thank you for your willingness to be interviewed today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
My pleasure. Okay, here's the first question. Discuss your background in libraries, please.
Okay, well, how far do you want me to go back, Hal? That's an interesting question. I was thinking about that. I wrote up some things
Yes.
there that just kind of give you an idea all the way through. But one thing I just thought I would mention, which I thought is kind of interesting, actually before when I got into libraries, I was a student worker. Well, I was at LSU. I was a freshman at LSU, and I wanted a job to get a little bit of money. Back in those days, you know, they paid about what 50 cents an hour or something like that. But anyway, so I started working, and I just so happened that I started working in the library school library, which was actually in the LSU library. And so basically, I just started doing the normal kinds of things that a student worker would do. And then the head of that department, Jenny Beth Clark, asked me if I was interested in doing, finding out more about libraries. And so then she asked me to do all sorts of things during the 3 years that I worked there. So that's kind of how I really got started way back into libraries. And then, of course, I went to library school there at LSU. From then, actually, I became a senior librarian at the library at LSU, and I was there a couple of years. I worked in the acquisitions department, and then I moved on. I had an interesting opportunity to go to a new junior college that Georgia was starting. In those years, they were founding a lot of new colleges, 2-year institutions. And so I went to the Macon Junior College in Macon, Georgia. And so I was there. It was a lot of fun because when we got there, there was basically nothing on the campus. They were starting to build some of the buildings. They went in, one of the things they did, the first building actually they built on the campus was the physical plant building where all the stuff was going to be, all the hardware and all the things that they would need to maintain the campus. But that was the only building on campus. And so we started the library basically moving things into that building. We had one little office area that was air conditioned. Most of the building was not air conditioned. And that's most of the places where we worked actually building the collection and getting all the books coming in. So that was kind of an interesting experience. Then from there, since I really wanted to get back into universities, although Macon Junior College was a wonderful experience for me, and I learned a lot there. So I moved on in 1970, moved on to the University of South Carolina. And I worked there for Ken Toombs. I know y'all probably know Ken Toombs. And I learned a tremendous amount there because Ken actually, he was an interesting person to work with, but he also knew a lot about building libraries. And so at that time, we added on to the Thomas Cooper Library, which at that time was a undergraduate library. So that was an interesting experience. That's when I really began to learn some things from a real veteran of library buildings and library construction. And I really valued that experience. And then from there, went to the university, the Appalachian State University up in Boone, North Carolina. We'd always loved the mountains and we wanted to go up there. I was there about 2 or 3 years. And then I liked working there at Appalachian State. It was an interesting experience. Then I got a call from a good friend of mine who said, there's a job offer out there at the University of Georgia. You may want to take a look at that because it's an ARL library. You might want to get back into that. So that's basically what I did. I was there for 17 years, basically in the acquisitions department and head of tech services and all of those sorts of things. I should say basically too, most of my career has been in technical services and acquisitions and technology. Those are the areas that I've been interested in and continue to be interested in. But also, that gave me a lot of good experience. And then later, I had later back in I guess it was 1997. I was at Georgia for about 17 years, and then in '97 I moved to University of Central Florida, of course, where I've been since and retired this past January. And it's been an interesting experience all through my career. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. It's been a lot of fun.
You know, Barry, I interviewed George Stewart the other day, and listening to your description of the history with libraries, he also mentioned individuals who were mentors to him and how how much influence they had and how helpful they were. And that seems to be a big part of individuals in this profession, that there seems to be a number of people along the way who are mentors who want to help you, and we learn so much from them. So that seems to be a common theme of those who have moved from one library position to another. So it just that seems to be a theme that runs at least through the 2 or 3 interviews I've done.
Well, I think that's true, Hal, because you meet people, you work with people over the years. They move on to positions. I had a person that I worked with who was actually in the library school when I was there at LSU as a student worker. And he moved on to be play a major role in libraries, and and I think that's the kind of thing that you work with. And then he would let me know, here's a position you might want to take a look at. And then also just learning things from people is important too.
Right, yeah. There, those who have had experience and they talk about, well, this is the way to do it. It really is helpful because then you learn from somebody who's gone through the situation in the past, and you learn not to do this and not to do that, or to do this and do that. So yeah.
Well, you also learn, I think, of things that they were doing. I know that Ken Toombs at the University of South Carolina was really very interested in library automation. Way back then, that just weren't very many things going on. And so he installed, a circulation system that we designed there. And then we also designed an acquisition system, very primitive, with punch cards, those sorts of things. But those are the kinds of things back in the beginning that you really learn.
Right. Okay, question number 2. Describe your history with SELA, such as your first involvement, positions held, and other service.
Okay. Well, basically, I started in SELA in 1968. I was out of library school, and then I was at, of course, I guess I was at the University of South Carolina, and so found out a lot about SELA, and really thought it was an interesting time. Also, interesting, another little thing. Well, I better not say that. I was going to say something else, but I'll leave that. Anyway, so that was when I started, and I really liked SELA because there were a lot of interesting libraries that were involved in it. It was doing a lot of interesting things. It was a large organization at that time. It had really good meetings. They were fun to go to. Met a lot of good people. And so, and then I've always tried to do in any organization I've gone into, I want to be more than just, going to the meetings and that sort of thing. I like to, serve in some way for the organization. So as it turns out, I was really very fortunate that I was chosen to do a lot of interesting things. Of course, some things are really not all that interesting, like nominating committees and things like that, that you do, but they're fun still. And then I went on to be the vice chair and chair-elect of the Resources and Technical Services Division, because that was my main interest. And I served as chair of that also, and this was in the early 80s. And then I was also, after that experience, I was asked to be the vice chair and chair-elect of the University and College Library section. And that was another good experience. 2 totally different things. And working with all libraries and then working with the technical services side of the house as well was fun. And also, another really interesting thing that we really did back then was I was on the site selection committee, conference site selection committee. And I was asked to be on that, really not knowing too much about what it did. But it was a really interesting experience because I was able to, the committee went around and we looked at sites. We recommended sites for the conferences. And back then, a lot of times we had meetings with state libraries, but not always. And so, but it was an interesting experience just to see how all of that worked. In other words, there's the board would recommend certain areas that they might like for us to go to, and then we would go to those sites. And then, we were kind of wined and dined, as you would imagine. But it was an interesting experience to see how all of that works, how the housing, or I guess you should say the tourist or the hotels and all of those kinds of things really work back in those days. And of course now it's changed a lot, obviously.
Yes.
So, but it was a good experience. Then served as chair-elect again, and and chair of the Resources and Technical Services section again. I guess I couldn't find anybody that wanted to do it or something. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly. But it was funny because I was looking at my resume, and I said, "Did I do that a second time?" And I said, "Well, I guess I did." Anyway, so that was fun. And then after that, I served on the executive board, and then of course I served as president, um, and actually, president and past president, and that was interesting too. I was also I think the chair of the budget committee and a couple of other committees like that too after I was past president. But I've really enjoyed SELA. I think just the people in it, the friends that you make over the years, the people you see at other conferences. It's just, and I've always recommended that to new librarians coming along. In fact, when I was at University of South Carolina, a lot and Georgia too, we had new librarians that we would hire that were just right out of library school or something. I would usually try to talk to them, the first few weeks that they were there, and take down, the SELA information as well as the state information and ALA stuff, because to me, those organizations are really good, and a lot of young librarians can get started by going to the state organizations. They may not be able to afford to go to ALA or other things like that. They could probably go to the state or the regional organization if it was close by. And you learn and you meet a lot of people too. And to me, a lot of librarianship is about people.
Right. I know when I first started at UCF, you suggested SELA, and that's how I got involved. And with regard to being on different committees, it's true, you'd have no idea how much work there is to do, but what's involved. And with your experience of being on different committees through SELA, you really see how the organization functions, and it makes you very much aware of how much work there is with every committee. So yeah, that's the interesting part about serving on different committees.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, question number 3. Talk about your time as president of SELA. For instance, could you share any major accomplishments, initiatives, or challenges you faced while president?
Okay. Actually, I would say accomplishments, basically the one that really stands out, I think. And that was when I was president. Ann Hamilton came to me and told me that she, of course, was at Georgia Southern. And she said that this individual had talked to her about the possibility of setting up some sort of a memorial to someone. And that sounded kind of interesting to me. And she gave me the letter from him and all of that. And so I started pursuing that. And that was when we established the Jenny Frankenhaller memorial and a scholarship. And that it was an interesting experience. He was very interested in working with us, and he was a Georgia businessman, Bud Frankenthaler, and he wanted to establish a memorial scholarship for his wife Jenny. And the reason he wanted to do this, and then the amount of that was $1,000, and that's what was his recommendation. And he was interesting to work with. He had some really good ideas about how he wanted that scholarship to work. Some were a little interesting because the way he wanted it to go. And so we kind of worked with him, going back and forth for a while, and then we got it all set up. And basically, you probably know, and then of course it's gone on for every 2 years, ever since. It started in 2002. And the main thing that he was interested in, his wife she was very interested in libraries, and she knew that libraries really were educational. They were things they were good for people coming along, and it really helped the population. It helped everybody. And so what she wanted to do, because she wanted something, uh, he wanted something rather, in the southeastern uh, part of the country, or southeastern Georgia, I should say, and because that's where the area that they were from. And so, or well, I said that wrong. Actually, a service to libraries in the southeast. So what we did, we we talked about it a little bit, and then we put together what he wanted to do. And the way he wanted this to work is that there would be a librarian that would be chosen, somebody that was in library school. And they would get the $1,000 scholarship. They would come in and apply for that, and then they would be chosen based upon their applications. Now, one of the things that was a little bit unusual is that he also wanted to be sure that they went on to be in a library. So they couldn't just have the scholarship and go off and do something. They wanted to be in a library in the southeast United States. And so and of course, that was one of the things that the people, that got the scholarships and have continued to do that. They would do work in libraries there. I guess forever, but they would work there. And and then the other thing that was interesting too, I thought, is that if there was somebody from a particular area of Georgia, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but where they lived, in on the applicants, and all things being equal, that person would be chosen. Which I thought was an interesting way to do it. So
You mentioned his wife, and libraries really do impact people, and so much so that he wanted to give money in honor of his wife, who was a big supporter of libraries. So
and he continues to do it. He's been doing it now for what, 12 years or something, 10 years.
yeah.
This is every other year. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, question number 4.
Well, I was going to say one more thing, Hal, on that.
Sure, please.
Another thing that I thought we got started, which was an interesting thing to do, was starting peer review for the Southeastern Librarian. I asked Frank Allen, and of course, Frank Allen.
Yes.
He probably does too. But and I asked him if he would be the editor of the Southeastern Librarian. So he did that for about 4 years. And one of the things that he did when we first started talking about it and taking over, he said he would like to do that. So it would be a peer-reviewed journal. He thought that was more important. So that got started while Frank was the editor. The other thing also that happened around that time or during that time was that it became available electronically on the SELA website, which I thought was important. So those are really the two things that really stand out, I guess you could say.
Okay. So before you became president, the journal, the Southeastern Librarian, was not peer reviewed. How hard was that to change from a regular journal to a peer reviewed journal?
Really, Frank just did it, basically. I don't remember exactly how that worked, but it was. I mean, I think people thought it was a good thing to do.
Yes, when I was involved, and we would promote the benefits of being a SELA member, we mentioned to them how much by publishing in the Southeastern Librarian, that was peer reviewed. And that was another thing that attracted members or people to become members of SELA.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing too.
Yes. Okay. As you gaze into your crystal ball, what advice do you have for SELA to remain relevant during the next 10, 25, or 50 years?
Well, that's an interesting one. Very interesting. As I said, SELA to me, was really, a wonderful organization and really has a lot to offer and still does. And one thing I didn't mention before that you talked about challenges, I'll kind of go back for a second. One of the things that I thought were challenges while I was president was that we had some issues with some of the state organizations that were part of SELA, formally, and were starting to pull away. And that was something that really concerned us then, the executive board and all, because, it was a good thing for them to be part of SELA, but a lot of them couldn't afford it or didn't want to or whatever. I think that's changed a little bit in the past, but I think that was another challenge for us. But I think you know we I think nowadays, of course, now with the pandemic and everything is really very different. Um, we're physical distancing, working from home, other safety measures and things that have to be put in place. And how you probably know this as well. Just as I see things that are going on, in the UCF library now, after I left, and I left. My last day was in February. It's hard to believe the differences
Hmm.
of what's going on because of what's happening. I
Yeah.
know school is just getting started there, but still, it's those kinds of things, and so it's going to be difficult, I think, for face-to-face conferences to take place, or at least for a good while. I mean, there may be some, but it's going to be a lot of challenges to that, and I think that's I think something that we need to think about and consider. Of course, there like Zoom and other virtual conferences. We were already doing some of that, obviously, with Skype and some other things, because I think everybody can't get to all the meetings and so on. And there's a lot, but I think that's going to be a lot more of that in the future.
Two things. One is, I know when I was working, you had to decide, do you want to do local or statewide, regional, or national? And you could join all three, but most people can't afford to join all three. So the nice aspect of SELA, because it is regional, it's a little larger than, say, a state conference, and you get input from people who live in different parts of the Southeast. That's what I found was real beneficial, was not just Florida, and Florida has a lot of great things about it, but being a regional conference, it's not quite national, but you do get that flavor of it. And yes, just putting together this conference that we're currently working on now, it's all virtual, which is a whole different way of setting things up as opposed to we'll call a traditional conference. So yeah, right now we're experiencing the challenges and what life will be maybe for the next 20, 25 years.
Well, I think that's very true, and in some ways, it's unfortunate because being with people, uh, you know, being in the same room with people and talking, um, you can do it virtually. And we do that a lot, but I think you do lose something, that close contact.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Attending the conference was always educational, but also fun because again,
mhm,
you meet people from the region and their backgrounds are different and
right,
just
right.
what they do, and that makes it that actually was a fun part of going to the conferences, meeting people you see once a year and just catching up on things, and that personal one-on-one contact is
Right.
is is very important. Okay, question number 5. Do you have any other comments or stories about SELA that you would like to share?
Well, okay, I will. I thought about this one. It's kind of interesting. Um, SELA was actually one of the first professional associations that I joined when I started my career. I think I mentioned that a little bit a while ago too, as well. And I think through the years, SELA has really provided a lot of an important role in my career. I would say it's I've enjoyed working with SELA, that through the various organization structure kinds of things that I did, but also just participating in the activities professionally and personally. Been both professionally and personally rewarding, and that's why, like we were saying a while ago, to encourage people to do that. A lot of the younger librarians, that's a way that they can get started and really kind of begin to get their I guess people that they'll work with that are not right in their home uh, institution. But it's been fun. I've been enjoyed meeting a lot of new people, colleagues from libraries of all different types. Um, some of my best friends that I came across over the years, I met in SELA, and some of them were public librarians, had a real good friend in South Carolina who was head of a large public library. And so you learn a lot about the public libraries, talking to people. I mean, it's not just, you've got your own, of course you stay in your own niche to a certain extent, but then you meet a lot of other people in other types of libraries, public libraries, private libraries, institutional libraries, all different types. And I think that's a very important part of what SELA is all about. And then it's in the region, and I think it's provided a lot of information, a lot of, I guess you'd say, interesting things to do, meet a lot of good people, and learn a lot over the years. So.
Yes, as I probably mentioned earlier, that by being a SELA member, you do have that contact with people from not your own little area, but be it catalogers, be it other reference librarians of what I was, or circulation people. And that was the benefit of SELA, that you're on committees with people from all these different work backgrounds, and you do learn what it is like to be a head of circulation or head of cataloging. And so SELA really is educational in that respect. You I think appreciate more what people do just when you hear what they do.
Well, that's a good point, Al, also. And I think talking about the friend of mine from the public library, it was really very interesting because that was my first experience with someone that really administered a public library. And so it's the things that he would do that were so totally different from what we would do in academic libraries. Because he had a board of trustees, that he had to make sure we're happy with what he was doing, so to speak. And there's a lot of interesting things there that you don't really think about in public libraries unless you meet that or someone has that experience. And that's been true. That was helpful to me as I moved around, and particularly when I came down to here. One of the things that I did was try to meet, the head of the Orange County Public Library and some of the other libraries, the Rollins Library, the Winter Park Public Library, those kinds of things there. It's because you want to, work with those individuals when you move into an area, because it's really important to do that. So that's been interesting too.
I should have alerted people before we started this interview that when I started UCF, you were the library director. And so, so I know you for a few years before this actual interview. So yes. Well, that concludes the interview. Unless you have something else you'd like to share, that would be great if you'd like to. If not, we appreciate you participating in this program, but I opened it up just a moment ago by saying, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or if not, we say thank you for the interview, but is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, you probably will take this out, but I guess I was just wondering how the camels were doing.
Oh, that's an inside joke between Barry and myself. So yes, and they're doing fine, just to let you know, Barry.
Well, very good, very good. I enjoyed the rides.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank y'all, and
thank you.
Well, it's good to see you again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.